What if the person you once loved deeply stood right in front of you, but you didn't recognize them until they whispered your name? This is the heartbreaking yet beautiful story of a poor food truck girl who ignored the millionaire CEO in line, until his words unlocked a past she had buried in her heart. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this one will touch your soul and keep you coming back for more. Sparkles. The sun was just beginning to rise over the bustling city, painting the streets with streaks of pale orange as people hurried to their jobs, students rushed to buses, and shopkeepers lifted shutters to welcome another day. Among the chaos stood a small food truck parked at the corner of a busy avenue, its faded red paint and squeaky metal door making it stand out not for its beauty, but for its persistence. Inside the truck, a young woman in her early 20s worked tirelessly, her dark hair tied back in a messy bun, her simple apron stained with sauces from countless sandwiches and wraps. Her name was Aaliyah, and to anyone who passed by she looked like just another girl trying to make ends meet. But behind her tired smile lived a heart that had seen far more pain and sacrifice than most her age. She woke up before dawn every day to prepare food, not because she loved the work but because she had no other choice. Life had not been kind to her. Her father had passed away when she was 16, leaving behind debts that crushed the family. Her mother's fragile health meant she couldn't work much, so the responsibility to provide fell on Aaliyah's young shoulders. She had once dreamed of studying, of perhaps becoming a writer or teacher, but dreams had to be folded away when reality demanded rent, medical bills, and groceries. And so, her food truck became her battlefield, her survival, and her identity. People from offices nearby often came to grab their morning coffee and breakfast. Most of them didn't bother remembering her name, they just called her Food Truck Girl or the Sandwich Girl. She didn't mind, attention was the last thing she wanted. But there was one thing she always noticed about her customers, the difference in the way they looked at her. Some looked at her with impatience, as if her slow hands were wasting their precious time. Some looked at her with pity, a silent acknowledgement that she was struggling. And then there were those who didn't look at her at all, as though she were invisible, a part of the truck rather than a living soul with a story. She had gotten used to it. Or so she thought. That morning, as the line in front of her truck grew longer, Aaliyah kept her focus sharp, bread toasted, sauces spread, coffees poured. The orders flowed like clockwork. But then, as she turned to hand over a sandwich to a grumpy banker, her eyes brushed past a man standing a few places down in the line. At first, she thought nothing of it. Another customer, neatly dressed in a tailored suit, polished shoes that probably cost more than her entire day's earnings, and a watch that gleamed like it had been bathed in light itself. He looked like one of those corporate executives from the tall glass buildings across the street, the kind of man who never had to worry about counting coins before buying bread. She didn't think twice about him, except for one thing, his eyes. For the briefest moment, she thought they looked familiar. Dark, deep, holding a trace of something she couldn't quite place. She shook her head and got back to work, convincing herself that her tired mind was just playing tricks. She had seen thousands of customers over the years, it was easy to confuse a stranger with a face from the past. When his turn came, she didn't look directly at him, only asked, "What will you have?" in her usual brisk tone. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he studied her, his gaze soft but intense, almost as if he were searching for something. Finally, he ordered a simple sandwich and coffee. She nodded, wrote it down, and moved to prepare it, not realizing that every small movement she made, how she pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, how she pressed the sandwich with care, how she avoided looking at him, was being memorized by the man before her. To her, he was just another rich customer, the type she usually ignored. But to him, she was everything. He had known her once, years ago, in another world where she wasn't trapped behind a food truck window. Back then, she had been full of laughter, her eyes sparkling with dreams she wasn't afraid to share, her presence enough to make him believe in something beyond wealth and power. They had been young, perhaps too young, and circumstances had torn them apart. He had searched for her after life took him into the ruthless corridors of business, but she had vanished, like a shadow in the dark. And now, suddenly, here she was, in front of him, unaware that the boy she once knew had become the man standing in line at her food truck. When she handed him his order, she barely met his eyes. "Here you go," she said flatly, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone used to being unseen. He wanted to say something, to remind her, but he held back. Maybe she wouldn't remember. Maybe she didn't want to. So instead, he walked a few steps away, took a sip of the coffee, and then returned, his expression unreadable. "Excuse me," he said softly, leaning closer so only she could hear, "still remember me?" Aaliyah froze. The words felt like thunder in her ears, pulling her back through years she had locked away. She lifted her gaze, really looking at him for the first time. The jawline was sharper, the shoulders broader, the presence more commanding, but the eyes, those eyes belonged to someone she had once known, someone she had thought was lost to her forever. Her heart stuttered, and her hands trembled slightly as she whispered, almost afraid of the answer, "It can't be." "Armin?" The name left her lips before she could stop it, and the man's smile confirmed everything. It was him, the boy who had once walked her home from school, the one who had promised to always be there before life tore them apart. But now he was no longer just Armin. He was a man who carried power and wealth in his very posture, a millionaire CEO whose name she had occasionally read in newspapers without realizing it was the same person from her past. She felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the collision of past and present. She had ignored him, dismissed him as just another wealthy customer, and yet he had been standing there, waiting for her to remember. Her world, already fragile, tilted as questions and emotions flooded her heart. Why was he here? Why now? And what did it mean for a girl like her, bound by struggles, to face someone who now belonged to a world so far above hers? Aaliyah's breath caught as the truth settled in. Armin, the boy who once shared his lunch with her when she had none, was now the man whose face appeared in magazines as a self-made millionaire CEO. For a moment, she didn't know whether to smile or cry. Why are you here?" she asked softly, her hands still trembling. Armin's eyes softened as he leaned closer, his voice steady yet filled with unspoken longing. "Because I promised I'd find you again. No matter how long it took." Her chest tightened at the words, memories rushing back, laughter under streetlights, whispered dreams, the comfort of his presence when the world felt unbearable. She had buried all of it beneath years of struggle, but now, standing before her food truck, those buried emotions bloomed again. Yet fear gnawed at her. "You've built a world I don't belong to," she whispered. Armin shook his head, determination flashing in his eyes. "My world was never complete without you. Money means nothing if I can't share it with the one person who ever truly saw me." Tears welled in Aaliyah's eyes. For the first time in years, hope stirred in her heart. Sparkles, and before we move to the next story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching tales. Sparkles.